Hi, I'm Michelle Chalfant, psychotherapist, holistic life coach, and human just like you, learning to navigate life's challenges. With over 25 years experience, I teach people how to get healthy using the adult chair model. The adult chair model is where simple psychology meets grounded spirituality, and it teaches us how to become healthy adults. From anxiety and depression to codependency and relationship issues, you can use the adult chair for just about anything. Each week, I share practical tips, tools, and advice from myself and a wide range of experts on how to get unstuck, how to live authentically, and how to truly love yourself, all while sitting in your adult chair. Welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. I am Michelle Chalfant, where we talk all about how we find our healthy adult. Yes, our healthy adult means we're living in our adult chair, and that's our goal. We're all trying to find our way into our adult chairs, and this show is all about really finding ways for us and tools to help us to get in that healthiest version of self, and today is no different. Today I'm talking with two fabulous ladies about anxiety. We've got Abbe and Maggie on, the Anxiety Sisters, and we had such a great conversation about anxiety. Yeah, all things anxiety. I am experiencing just a little bit of anxiety, not a lot. Actually, mine's not anxiety. Mine is excitement. Because in, 3 days, I am leaving for the second adult chair coaching certification. Yes. First week of March. It is here. And we've got some amazing new coaches that are going to be going through our 6-month program. And I'm really excited. I'm not anxious. I think I was anxious a few weeks ago when I was looking through and going through the manual again, because of course I'm a perfectionist. So I'm editing away and changing things and all that good stuff, which did bring me a little bit of anxiety, but that passed when I felt like I was done with it. So anyway, I am so excited. This is our second class. And if you'd like to check out our current coaches from last year, they're on the website at theadultchair.com. Just click on the TAC Coaches tab and you will see all of our fabulous coaches right there. Let's see. Anxiety. Do you all even know really what it feels like to have anxiety? Because let me tell you something. Abbe and Maggie and I had such an interesting conversation around anxiety. We were talking about how for so long, all three of us did not even know that we had anxiety. And it just wasn't talked about way back when as it is now. But I find even people now, I know when I had my private practice, I would listen to people and they'd come in and I'd say, "It sounds like you have anxiety." And they'd say, "What?" "No, I don't. I think you might. Let's check it out." And we had a conversation all about things like this. They had crippling anxiety. Crippling. In fact, one of the two of them actually spent some time in the hospital many times because of their anxiety and did not know it was anxiety. So yes, we talked about anxiety, panic attacks. How do you prep for panic? They have a beautiful little tool. It's not a little tool. It's a great tool that we all should have if you experience anxiety. It's called the Spin Kit. Yes, they talk all about the Spin Kit, and it's unique for every single person. And yeah, it was such a great show. We talked about medication. We talked about, they gave us some good advice for people that are suffering from anxiety right now. So you're not going to want to miss this show. If you or someone that you know suffers with anxiety, this is a great, great show for you to listen to. And I do want to remind you that if you need support, if you feel like you want to reach out and you don't know where to go, I just want to remind you we have a lovely group of people in the Adult Chair closed Facebook group. They are such a vulnerable group of souls in there, and there is a process to even get in that group. We ask questions. We screen every single person that comes through that the Facebook door. So If you're looking for a group like that, people love it. Head on over to Facebook, and it's the Adult Chair Closed Facebook group. You can just do a search and you can jump right in if you would like some support. And not only with your anxiety, but just finding your way into your adult chair. That's what we talk about in there. So we'd love to have you. All right, let's talk about the Anxiety Sisters. Abbe Greenberg, MCIS, and Maggie Sarachek, MSW, are trained counselors, mental health advocates, researchers, educators, writers, and longtime anxiety sufferers. In 2017, they launched their online community, which now includes more than 200,000 people in 200 plus countries and territories. Together, the Anxiety Sisters write an award-winning blog and host the monthly podcast, The Spin Cycle. Having learned to simply Having learned to live happily with anxiety, they spend their time coaching anxiety sufferers and conducting workshops and retreats. You guys are going to love this show. We had great chemistry. We had a lot to talk about, all things anxiety. Here we go with Abbe and Maggie.
Okay, there we go.
Nothing like starting a show laughing. That's how much we already like each other here. So welcome to the show, Abbe and Maggie. It's so nice to have you on the Adult Chair podcast.
Oh, we're delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. So I was just talking with you guys about your Anxiety Sisters. And I said, are you really sisters? And you said?
We are soul sisters.
Love that. And you guys met in college in Philadelphia.
Although we fight like real sisters.
Exactly. That's what we always say. We fight like real sisters, but we're soul sisters.
I think that soul sisters can fight too, right?
Yes.
It's called healthy communication. I mean, it's just
Absolutely.
like, good. Well, that's so fun. You guys have known each other a long time, which I love.
Yeah.
And I was sharing with you a minute ago that you're talking about, again, I have a lot of favorite topics, but anxiety is one that we can't talk enough about because so many people in the world are suffering from anxiety, right? So thank you. Thank you for all the work that you both do. You really both, are doing fabulous work in the world and educating people. So I want to hear from both of you. It's interesting because you both met in college, and I want to know your backstories. Like, how did you know? I like asking this question. How did you even know you had anxiety? Because let me tell you, I've sat with people over almost 30 years of clients, and I can't tell you the number of people that I've sat with, and they're talking to me, and I'm like, it sounds like anxiety to me. And they're like, really? I'm like, yes, it's anxiety. They're like, I had no idea. I'm like, okay, so let's start there. How did you both know that you had anxiety?
Well, I think, looking back, I can see that I was a very anxious child. My very first memory of, I have OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. That's one of my many anxiety diagnoses. And I can remember my first obsessions and compulsions around driving in my parents' car when I was 5 years old. And I remember going out to the garage and tapping the tires 3 times at each tire before I would get in the car. And I remember trying to do it without my parents knowing, because I figured something was really wrong with me and I didn't want my parents to be worried. So I remember that obsession and those compulsions as young as 5. It might have been even earlier for all I know. I was diagnosed with OCD at 46 years old. So it was a lot of years of suffering.
I was just going to say that. My goodness, like that's a long life.
Yes, I
to
definitely
live without knowing why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, Mags and I always say we not only walked the walk, we huddled, heaved, hurled, sweated, palpitated, hyperventilated. I mean, we really experienced anxiety in just about every single form it can take, between obsessions, compulsions, panic, worry, catastrophizing, phobias, you name it. We've done that.
Wow. Okay. Oh my gosh, we have a lot to talk about. Thank you. So I'm curious. I just want to know, so when you tapped the tires when you were a little girl, was it because you're afraid they were not inflated enough, or what was that?
I don't know exactly what I was afraid of. I just knew that if I didn't tap the tires, then something would happen to the car. So so if I tapped each tire, then that would make us have a safe trip.
Mm.
I think I must have been afraid of having a
Mm.
car accident of some sort or tires
Yeah.
popping. I don't know, whatever a little kid could be afraid of. But I
Yeah.
just knew that unless I did that, and I literally would go into a full-fledged panic
Wow.
if I couldn't tap the tires. So I would often, like, I would need to know when we were going places so I could get up early and make sure I was out there tapping before anybody saw.
That's so young to me. I mean, what do you read? Do you have any memory of someone saying, we might have a car accident? Did someone have a car accident? Like, how did that happen at such a young age?
My mom and dad always like to tell me that when I was 3, I was having really, really grown-up conversations with Oscar the Grouch. So I just think I was a really imaginative child.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a trauma in,
Interesting.
in my early years of any sort that would have led to that. I think, my brain is wired that way. I am not a neurotypical girl. My
Mhm.
brain my amygdala is wonky and I'm wired for obsessions and compulsions and
Yeah.
panic and
Yeah.
anxiety and some depression. I've got a whole sprinkling of everything going on.
Wow.
So yeah.
But you've overcome, and that's what we're going to talk about in a moment, which is so
Yeah,
exciting. Yeah.
he was
So,
also a child. Abby was also a child that was very advanced in so many ways. And so I
mm,
think sometimes the really precocious children, like you talked incredibly early, read in like how old were you when you started reading? Like
They say I was 2. I wasn't, I don't know. My
that
parents,
yeah.
could have
my
been
parents
it.
say I
And
was talking at 9 months old and I haven't stopped since.
um, and I do think like sometimes people, excuse me, with those kind of brains, like
Yeah.
certain, it's almost like you see so much when you
Yeah.
have that sort
Yeah.
of precociousness that
It's like you said, like you're born wired like that. I mean, to have it at such a young age without any trauma or a memory of anything, and your parents have no memory, you just wonder if maybe there's a wiring in the
mhm.
brain. Interesting. What about you, Matt?
um I so my earliest memory of anxiety is also fairly young, and it was a lot of separation anxiety.
Yeah.
And um I think I was always sort of, like Abby said, wired toward anxiety. In my 20s, my dad died after a very, very long traumatic illness, many years. And about 6 months after that, I started getting terrible panic attacks,
Mm-hmm.
which quickly devolved into a lot of phobias,
Mm-hmm.
which quickly devolved into agoraphobia. And there were just so many phobias I had, particularly of any kind of transportation,
Mm.
including elevators. And I was living on the 16th floor in New York City.
Oh
Um,
no. Oh my gosh.
so and so there
Wow.
were just I was afraid of trains, of driving in the rain, of highways. I mean, there of flying. There was just so many phobias, and I really ended up, fairly agoraphobic. Um,
Mm.
and so, but I always had anxiety. And I think you were asking about how we recognize it. And I think for me and for Abby too, obviously, and you've talked about this, I've heard you say anxiety is so physical, right? So it's not like you're
Yeah.
thinking, oh, I'm anxious and I'm afraid. I think that's what people think it is,
Yeah.
but it's really, oh, I feel like I have the stomach flu and so I can't get out of the house, or I'm having the Bayer aspirin commercial symptoms, so I can't get out of the house, or, I am sweating, or I have rashes. So it's like, it's not as much, oh, I have anxiety and it's really
Yeah.
bad.
Well, and
Um,
also I hear a lot of people that have Crohn's disease or some sort of bowel issue,
yes. Oh,
and it's like,
stomach.
wait a minute. And then they go on like a medication that calms their nerves or stress. And guess what? It goes away. And it's like, wait a minute, that's anxiety. Like
Right.
you have anxiety and you don't even know it. It's creating all these bowel issues or stomach
Oh,
issues or yeah.
that happened. I mean, for me, it was like I couldn't keep anything down, but I
Yeah.
didn't have an eating disorder of any kind.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
really, I couldn't keep anything down. I couldn't eat and I couldn't keep anything down. That was a symptom for me. But,
Mm.
when you get a symptom like that in your 20s, for me, I kind of thought I'm dying.
Yeah.
You know,
I
something's
was going to
really
say, when
wrong.
Mags and I met, we didn't know we had anxiety. We didn't, I don't think we ever used the word anxiety in college, right? I mean,
No.
in 1980s, people
I
were
was going to
not
say, but
as
we're a little,
bullying.
we're old.
Yeah, it was the late
No,
80s.
we're not old. We're wise.
Why?
We are old and
I
wise.
know. Well, I mean, I always say, like, when I was in college, there was no laptop, there was no Amazon, there was no Google. So
No
we
cell
had to,
phones.
like, there's no cell. Well,
Oh,
we had the bag cell phones. I remember my dad, because I went to school in Ohio in undergrad, and he gave me the bag cell phone. You remember those that zip up?
Oh,
And
yeah.
you take the antenna and, like, what was it, the little suction cups to the outside window. I'm like, and I can still see my dad giving it to me. He goes, just in case you break down. I'm like, this is the stupidest thing, Dad. No one's ever going to use these things. Oh, I don't need it. I don't want this thing. That was what we had. Okay.
But we didn't
yeah,
have any cell phones. We just called our parents on Sundays for 10 minutes because it was
Same.
like
The
Yeah.
ridiculous
Sunday
amount
call.
of money to call per minute. So I
Yes.
remember my father would be like, okay, time's up.
exactly. Exactly. And there might have been something helpful about that too.
Right.
That there was like this limited contact.
But when Mags and I met in college, we did not use the words anxious or depressed or mental
Yeah.
health. None of that.
Nobody talked about that. There was
Yeah.
not a therapist on every corner. And to go to college, to the therapist in college was like, well, what's wrong with you that you have to go see the therapist? And, there were like,
We bonded over that. I was like,
Yeah.
did you go to counseling? And she's like, yes. What did they tell you? I was like, they just said that I should just calm down.
yeah.
I mean, I grew up in a house where I do have to say, like, because my mom was a social worker, we talked about
Ooh, I'm
stuff.
jealous.
It wasn't a house where mental health was not something, that we couldn't talk about, but it was so much less than it is today, and so much less of an understanding of how it actually affects us in daily life. So while going to a therapist to me, even in college, was not shameful,
Mm-hmm.
I still didn't have the vocabulary or the words to, like, make these connections of what I was feeling and how that was connected to anxiety.
We spent the beginning of our relationship basically just comparing symptoms.
Wow.
And pretty much thinking we would both die young, because I had all the cardiac symptoms. So if you're 20 and you're having chest pain and numbness in your left arm and tingling and all those awful, scary symptoms, I just was not planning on a long life. I figured I've got something terribly wrong with me. And Mags felt the same way with her stomach. She just was constantly nauseated. As I can't remember the first couple of years of our relationship where she wasn't nauseated.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to share my story too, since you guys shared yours,
please.
I'm not sure that I ever even, I mean, not that I ever would just not disclose, because I tell everyone my whole life, I don't really care. But so for me, I might have shared this. I might have shared it like in a workshop or something, but my father was so overprotective of me. I definitely have shared this at some point. That all my early learning, like all I ever heard was he was afraid I was going to get sick, stolen, or something else. Like, so he didn't let my mom take me anywhere when I was a little girl. And there was so much fear in my household about my mom be like, I just want to take her to the farmer's market. She's 3 years old. She's cute. I want to take her to see everybody and the vegetables and the whatever. And my dad's like, absolutely not. I want to take her to the mall. Absolutely not. I want to take her here. Absolutely not. And he was always afraid I was going to get sick. So I was always bundled up in coats and blankets, he was just worried about me, loved me to death, but so worried. So here I am, this little kid, and I start growing up. I was talk about separation anxiety. And I never thought about that with me, but I had that too, for sure. Absolutely paralyzed in fear when I was a little girl, because they always had me in like ballet school. We were a very musical family. So tap, jazz, and ballet, everyone's singing, I'm doing all this. They're dropping me off and I am in full on panic. Now I know that now, but when I was growing up, I'd be like, I would make them drop me off and sit in with me in dance class. The only parent would sit there and they go, we'll be right back in an hour. I'm like, no, you can't leave me. I was terrified. And they'd say, what are you afraid of? I'm like, I don't even know. Like I was a little kid. I don't know. I'm just so afraid you can't leave me. So that continued on and I masked it because it was so embarrassing. Even in high school, I'd be like, I remember my mom said, you remember, Wegmans, right?
Yes, of course.
The best.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, so my mom said, can you run up to, I was in high school. My mom said, can you run up to, I was 16 or 17. Can you run up to Wegmans and get my prescription? And Wegmans was 1.5 miles from my house. The wave of panic that came over me, I'm like, you want me to go by myself? By myself? Yes. And I drove 15 minutes in the other direction to pick up my friend to drive with me to Wegmans, which was a mile away, to go get my mom's prescription, take my friend home and drop her off. And then I went home. So it took me like a 45-minute trip that should have taken 5-10 minutes.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, I'm with you all on this whole, like, it didn't make sense to me. I didn't know what it was. And
what you've illustrated is what we talk about all the time,
Yeah.
which is that anxiety becomes really debilitating when it's in the driver's seat.
Yep, 100%. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you
for sharing with us.
I think a lot of people can relate to that one, definitely.
I didn't
those
know
kind of
it's
feelings.
so weird. It's so weird. So I had to overcome all the social anxiety and separation anxiety and all of these things. And one of the things that I talk about on the Adult Chair podcast is that for me, it was that anxiety is the physical manifestation of unfelt emotions, but I've added to that now because I also notice it's a dysregulation of the nervous system.
Absolutely.
And we need to learn, whether it be you have emotions that you're shoving down. And in a way, I mean, I did. Like, I was a little kid. I shoved all those emotions down, which then dysregulated my nervous system. So I needed to learn how to regulate the nervous system and feel the emotions. So tell me about your journey, both of your journeys, as far as, okay, so then you realize, oh my gosh, I have anxiety. Then what? Tell me what happened next.
Well, I like to say that for both of us, we went through the decade of the IS, 20s and 30s, which is we went to see the psychiatrist, the neurologist, the hypnotist, the past life regressionists,
Cardiologist,
gastroenterologist, whatever ist would take our money, basically, and that we could afford at the time.
Yeah.
And all those people, some of them were very helpful and wonderful professionals, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there's this process of accepting anxiety. It's not something that someone says you have anxiety and one day you're like, oh, that's it. At least that's not what it was for either one of us. It was a real process of going to all these people and sort of ruling out certain things and therapists saying, oh, well, I think that's anxiety, or someone else saying, I think that's anxiety. And piece by piece by piece, you kind of start to put it together. And we talk a lot in our book about acceptance and how that is like the first step in really healing is that acceptance of the reality of where you are, of what
it took me 4 emergency room visits for quote unquote heart attacks that I thought I was having.
Wow.
Or I finally thought, you know what, Mags, maybe this is anxiety. I mean, I've now been there 4 times. I've had all those cardiac enzyme tests. I've had the x-rays. I've had EKGs. I mean, every doctor is telling me it's anxiety. Maybe it is. I mean, it's so hard to believe that anxiety, it can cause such physical havoc in your body. It's very hard to believe. And we have a community of over 200,000 people. And I would say we've heard it 200,000 times. Like, I just couldn't believe that was anxiety.
Right.
That was doing it to me.
Right. That whole idea.
Maggie, I want you to talk a little, or both of you, either one, but you mentioned the word acceptance.
Yes.
This is something that I talk about a lot. And I get the same comments every time, even though I explain it. Doesn't mean you like it.
Right. Right.
All right. So when we think about anxiety and you're saying, you are suggesting one of the steps is this the first step to accept it? Yeah. Like really kind of like you were saying, Abby, you're in the hospital. You're like, gosh, maybe it is. I got to accept it. And you might not like it. Accepting it doesn't mean it's going to get worse. Accepting it doesn't mean anything other than this is where I am. So can you guys talk a little bit about acceptance? Because there's a power in acceptance, right?
I think there is. I mean, I think, sometimes I've told people when they have told me something about their parents, for example, or abuse that they suffered, or just a way they interact with their parents. It doesn't even have to be abuse. One of the things I'll say is that, you know, Abbe and I will both say to them is, well, sort of now you know the circumstance that's going to happen, right? When you go home or when you speak to your parents. So knowing the circumstance that's going to happen, like we could either have a fantasy that it's going to be different, which we all do, right? Yeah. We all have that fantasy in our head. It's going to be different. It's going to be what I need. Or you can prepare for the reality of what the situation has always seemed to look like and what it's probably going to look like this time. Yeah. And that's the same with anxiety. I think we say it's really preparing yourself for the reality of where you are at, you know,
for today. I think people get afraid that if they accept it and they really own it, that this is where they are, that it's going to be here forever. But it's like the first step to actually walk out of it or to make your life better, right?
Right. It's like it would be kind of like if you have strep throat, you know, you could say to the doctor, no, I don't have strep throat. There's no way I have strep throat. I'm just going to go do all my regular activities and, you know, and you're going to feel really horrendous. Or you could be like, all right, I have strep throat. I have to do what I have to do to get better from strep throat, whatever that is. You know, it's kind of like with anything physical, we understand in quote unquote physical things. You know, we have a broken leg, we need the cast, we need to rest the leg.
Yeah. But I think people say to themselves, but that's temporary. And I'm going to get over that. I can accept I have strep throat or pink eye or broken leg, you know, but I'll be over that in a few days. Where when you accept something bigger like this, I think people are just afraid. They think it's going to be forever, and it's not, right?
Tell us. When you talked a little bit about that we overcame our anxiety, I would say that for me at least, and I know Mags feels this way too, I don't know that we necessarily overcame anxiety. I feel like our brand of happy is anxiously happy, that we've accepted that we're not neurotypical, that our brains are wired so that our amygdala are very trigger happy. And it's going to see threats in places where they may or may not actually exist. And so we're going to be prone to anxiety in our life. That's just the way we're wired. But understanding that and accepting that that's a condition that we live with, just like somebody might live with diabetes or somebody might live with a hammer toe. I mean, whatever your condition is, you accept that, oh, I can live with this. It's, you know, it's not, what it isn't is a sentence of a bad life, right?
Does it make it less stressful though?
For me,
because you've owned it, because you've accepted it, right?
Yeah. And because, you know, when you're feeling a certain way, to be able to say, you know, this is my anxiety, and then I have a decision that I could make, you know, about how I'm going to manage that anxiety, right? So accepting is not saying like, my anxiety is telling me not to drive, so I'll never drive again. Accepting is saying like, oh, you know, I know that this is something I struggle with. And so this is what I need to do so that I can have this agency in my life, that I can make the decisions. And that's sort of what acceptance, it just gives you a clear view. Right.
And it gives you power, like you said, Michelle, because if you know that, you know what, even like, I know I tell Mags, I wake up sometimes with really bad anxiety, but I just say out loud even, all right, fine, you're here, whatever, but you're not driving. So it's, in other words, I can have a day with anxiety in it, but I'm going to still have my day. In other words, I will choose what I do that day. And that's different from 20 years ago when I would wake up with the crippling anxiety and say, well, I can't do anything.
Yeah, you're like a victim to it. So now it's empowering. I love that.
Yes.
So what was your way? So tell me, so the first step is acceptance. And what else? What if someone's listening to this going, oh my gosh, this is me. This is me. What would you say to them? What is the next step?
I don't know if it's a linear model of step by step. I mean, I definitely think acceptance is the first place to start.
Yeah.
And Mags and I are very, we're very dedicated to connection. We believe that something that's really important to do if you are struggling with physical symptoms of anxiety, even if you're at the very beginning of your process where you don't really believe it's anxiety, but you're going to your ISTs and they're telling you it's anxiety, that one of the next things you can do is start to connect with people who are also experiencing anxiety. And that's really why Mags and I created the Anxiety Sisterhood, because when we were in our 20s and we were struggling, we did two things. We were book people, so we went to the bookstore, and then we were social people, so we were looking for connection. And we had a really hard time in both of those situations because there was no community of anxiety sufferers that we could turn to. I mean, I guess you could join some sort of a support group in a therapeutic setting, but we really wanted something where it would be a little less scary, where we could just sit around and say, yeah, me too. I feel that happened to me also. What do you do about it? So we started the Anxiety Sisterhood with just the two of us so that we could have a place to sit and talk about our anxiety. And now there's more than 200,000 people that do that with us.
Amazing.
Because it's, 289 million people in the world have reported that they suffer from anxiety. So we know the number's much higher.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I always say we're in the world's largest sorority with the toughest initiation. I mean, we're your people, we're your tribe. So reach out. If you're starting to struggle with anxiety, you think it might be anxiety, reach out to us, come to our Facebook page. It's the most supportive, kind, generous group of people I've ever seen. It's the nicest place on Facebook. Because everyone is so kind and so warm and so helpful, and there's no judgment on our Facebook page. Everyone is accepted for who he or she is. Yeah. So obviously the connection piece is really important. That's the next step after starting to try to accept it. And even if you're not accepting it yet, still connect. That will help.
Yeah, for sure. So what are some things that people can do? What are some tools for people?
Well, we have so many. So we have a book called The Anxiety Sister Survival Guide. And I say that really because in that we have so many tools. And the reason we do that is, like Abbe said, we went to look for books on anxiety because that's like, we're sort of book people. Any problem, you go to a book, right? This was before the internet too. But we went to look at books, and all the different books had prescriptions for what you should do. Take medication, don't take medication. No, do cognitive behavioral therapy. Don't do acceptance, do an acceptance therapy, eat right, quote unquote, whatever that is. Yeah. Exercise. And, the books literally, Abbe looked at me once and said, I got to go outside and take a Xanax. I can't. I'm getting so scared.
I'm getting panicky.
And because the idea that there's one size fits all, many of us know that one size does not fit us sometimes on two separate days, but certainly one size does not fit all.
Right.
And so there's so many different things to do. And I think that one of the things you said before is something Abbe and I really believe in, which is that anxiety is we know that it's a brain, it's going on in our brain. And we also know that our sensory system is really affected. Yeah. So a lot of our tools, and we can talk about a few specific ones, a lot of our tools have to do with as much with calming down our sensory system, as a way to signal to our brain that it's time to calm down.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're reminding me, my husband, wanted a Philly cheesesteak this weekend. So I said, well, find a place that I can go. I get a salad. So we went out, and it was like a sports bar. And when I tell you, I was eating this lovely salad, and it wasn't that lovely, but it was okay. And I was eating the salad. It was at a sports bar. Not that he wanted to watch a game. He just liked the Philly cheesesteaks there. But I looked at him in the middle of this meal, and I said, I am so anxious. I am literally, look at my hands. I am shaking. I can't stand it. There's like 1,000 TVs in this damn place. I don't even know what I'm eating. I don't even know. And I'm like, eating is, I go, we got to get out of here. I can't take it anymore. I go, this is why I eat outside. And it's funny you said that, because I'm like, I know where I like to go out to eat. It's got to be quiet. My nervous system needs that. Plus, I don't know if you talk a lot about being an empath, like I'm picking up on everything. It's like, I like quiet. I need the quiet. So I'm glad you said that.
Anxiety sisters tend to be incredibly sensitive people.
Yeah, we're very
right?
sensitive. But I mean, but we need to,
But I
like you
mean
said,
sensory sensitive. In other
yeah,
words,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because we're
Too much. I don't like the bright lights. I don't like too much noise, like all of that. It's like,
and it makes sense, right? Because if our brains are on high alert because it thinks we're in danger, then of course our senses are going to be heightened. We,
yeah,
evolutionarily, your senses got heightened so you didn't get attacked unaware.
right.
So that's why the lights are too bright. The sounds are. It's like why things, certain certain tactile sensations may bother us all of a sudden. We might get itchy
Yes.
or hives, or for
Yes.
me, I develop a
Yeah.
super sniffer and I start to smell things no one should ever smell.
Same.
You
It's
know,
like bionic sense of smell. I'm like, well, how does no one else smell this?
Abby
So,
too. Abby too.
but that's the brain again.
yeah.
That's the part of the brain. So I think it's important, of course, to know like what's okay with you and own it. Don't be embarrassed by it. I said to my husband, never come back here with you again. This was awful. I will not do sports bar again. He's like, I'm so sorry. But give us some, you just talked about, give us, just for people listening, like, what can I do? I'm sitting here listening to this, about ready to jump out of my skin. Give us anything. Just give us a few things. Yeah.
One of our favorite things. Now, Mag said we have a whole arsenal of techniques because sometimes breathing works on Monday, but then on Tuesday it doesn't, and you get more panicky. So we really believe, and you have to have an arsenal of techniques. But one of our favorites, one of our signature techniques that we've done so many workshops on, and we've talked to people about, is called we believe in carrying a spin kit.
Oh.
And so we call it a spin kit. A spin kit is our term for a first aid kit for anxiety. And the reason we call it a spin kit is because, in terms of language, the way we talk about things often frames how we respond to it.
Yeah.
So, for instance, when our brains hear the word panic, it thinks it's a command. So we try to reframe panic into a more metaphorical version. We'd like to say it's like spinning, anxiety, right? And it feels like that. Yeah. And that's why we call our podcast the spin cycle, because anyone who's had a panic attack knows it feels like you've been in your washing machine on the spin cycle. Yep. Right? You're completely drenched, your heart is racing, and you think you're going to die. So we call it spinning. And we believe in carrying a spin kit. Just like if you have an allergy, you might carry an EpiPen. So if you have anxiety, you would carry with you a spin kit. And our spin kits, everyone's going to have a different spin kit because different things soothe different people. But our spin kits basically have 3 components. They have things to distract you during your spinning, because you can't fight it. If we start to fight the panic or the anxiety, if we start to say, oh, I'm going to put all my energy into stopping it, guess what happens?
It gets
worse.
Yeah.
Right. What we pay attention to grows. So that's why it starts with noticing a small symptom, and then you have a niggle in your head. What is that? Gee, I wonder could that be bad? And then because we're paying attention to that symptom, it gets worse. And then we're like, oh my God, it's bad, it's bad. And that's how the panic loop goes. So we can't fight it. So we want to be distracted during it. And everybody has a different type of distraction. For instance, I like a fidget spinner. I have all different types of those. I also carry pictures of my cats, which tend to soothe me when I look at their faces. Mags always carries crochet or needlework of some sort, because that keeps her hands engaged, and it's just enough of an activity. She doesn't have to concentrate too hard, but it can keep her busy during the spinning episode. And then the second thing you want in your spin kit is something to soothe your senses. So that could be, could be noise canceling headphones. If things are feeling really loud, could be what do you call that? An eye.
Oh, the eye shade. The eye.
The eye.
Yeah, the thing
we're all having
eye. The eye shades. I sleep with them every night too. The eye thing. The eye shade. Yeah.
It's a kind of heavy or whatever, but like mine has lavender smell in it. So
you put some essential oils, and some of them have the beanbag. You're saying
eye pillow. Yes. Eye pillow. It's an eye pillow.
Eye pillow. Yes.
It's like I still remember SAT words like recalcitrant, but I can't remember the name of the place that I stood and got wet this morning when I did my hair. But it's like, this is what happens when you get to middle age. But anyway, so soothers for your senses. Maybe it's a strong mint to kind of distract you and ground you and occupy your sense of taste, or a smell like lavender. And then the last thing that you want in your spin kit is some kind of symptom relief. So for Mags, who tends to be a stomach sister, she might carry Tums or Gas X or something to soothe her stomach, or Pepto. Whereas since I get sort of the cardiac symptoms, I might pop part of a Xanax or some kind of sedative, or if somebody gets headaches or migraines, they might take a medication for that. Whatever soothes you, whatever heals your symptom, even if it's chamomile tea or ginger tea, if you have stomach upset, it doesn't have to be a medication. But so people can put a Ziploc bag or one of those makeup kits, whatever works for you, just something you can carry.
Love that.
And you just throw in a bunch of stuff that's going to be ready for you when you start to spin. And now here's the best part of a spin kit. See, if you're carrying a spin kit, what you're really saying is, I'm ready for you. So anxiety can no longer sneak up on you.
Ooh,
and when it can't sneak up on you, it takes away 2/3 of its power. So people have said to us, I started carrying a spin kit and I noticed that my panic attacks weren't as strong. Well, yes, because a lot of what makes the panic worse is when we think, why is this happening? Why is this happening? But if you're carrying a spin kit with you, what you're saying is, it's going to happen. I have anxiety, so I'm going to get these things.
Yeah.
Part of that acceptance piece.
Yes.
Love that. And it's very customized because you're absolutely right. No two people have the same exact anxiety and panic. Nobody does.
Yes. If Maggie had pictures of my cats in her spin kit, she would panic.
Yes. I'm afraid of her cats. So that would not, they make me panic. So that would not be helpful.
Oh, I love that. So what's the difference between anxiety and a panic attack? Well, how do you sisters define a panic attack?
Well, a panic is one of the many subsets of anxiety that you can have. So there's ways a lot of us are anxious without ever panicking. Not me, but many people are. So a panic attack is usually that very extreme, and it's feeling, and it's very physically, it's like sort of very, very physical, as we've been talking about. And there's also some emotional pieces to it, whether it's like obsessively thinking, which is sometimes like, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, what's happening to me.
Yeah.
And that's part of we tell people that feeling that you're definitely going to die is part of having a panic attack. It's sort of not separate. It's like your brain is saying, I need to be on the highest amount of alert right now.
Yeah.
I am in fight, flight, or freeze, and I need to, nothing is going to distract me from this, because your brain is actually trying to keep yourself safe.
Always. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of physical symptoms involved particularly in panic.
And they tend to intensify.
Yeah. Mine was, I think I've had two, but the first one I told my son to call 911.
Yes,
and
that's very typical.
Yeah. It was about, it had to be at least 10 or 12 years ago, because he was little. And it was not over fight or flight. Well, in a way it was, I was afraid. It was because of the dang real estate market at the time. There were all these, I lived in Nashville, and a house would come on the market, and it was like kind of like it is now, honestly. Yes. This insanity, like scrambling around, throwing offers in above what the value is, waiving appraisals and inspections. It was like, 12 people would throw an offer in. So I was in this, we got to get a new house. I want to get out of this house. So every time a new house would go on the market, I would get myself so worked up, and I'd have the realtor. It was like going 1,000 miles an hour, and I'd put another offer in, and then I'd sit with, oh my God, where's the realtor? Why isn't she calling me? Did we get the house? Did we not get the house? And the one day that happened, and I was waiting to hear from the realtor. And the longer I waited, the more anxious I became. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, my heart is racing. I remember I had a white button up, like a blouse on, and my jeans. And I went and laid down on my bed. I said, something is not right. And my button down white blouse looked like I gotten out of the shower.
Right.
And I was soaking wet, and I couldn't breathe, and my stomach was in knots. And I called my son. I go, I think you need to call 911. I'm having a heart attack or something. And then I called my brother-in-law, who's a doctor. And I'm like, what the hell's wrong with me? I don't know what's going on. And he said, I think you're having a panic attack. It's not a heart attack. I was like, what? I'm having a panic. I was so like, what are you, why? What? I don't know what happened. And then I traced it back. Of course, it was so much stress trying to get us into a new house. It was all of that.
Right.
So.
No, it's an environmental, in that case, sometimes they come on really uncued.
Yeah.
And in that in that case, it was like an environmental stress sort of going on for you.
What happened was your brain.
I created it myself in a way because I didn't intentionally, of course, but
No.
my brain was going a million miles an hour as it normally does, but it was zeroed in and I felt like there's no hope. I'm trapped. And that's where it like launched.
Probably what was going on were the hidden what ifs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So probably in the back of your mind was, what if I don't get the house? What if
yes.
So that was creating an emergency.
Oh, it was.
And that's sort of when people ask me what's the difference between garden variety anxiety and panic attacks. I said, you know what? If you're going to have a panic attack, you will know it. It's an emergency. It feels like an emergency. It feels like you have to call 911 or something. I mean, you can't, like Maggie said, you can't think about anything else, and you wouldn't even recognize it as anxiety necessarily, which is why it took me 4 trips to the ER for 4 separate quote unquote heart attacks, which never happened. But I went 4 times. And the last time I almost grabbed the attending doctor by the neck. And because he said to me, we did the x-rays, we did the blood work. Your EKG is normal. Your heart is just fine. And I said, haven't you seen House? Clearly you've missed something. I mean, I really was angry because I was like, I'm not making this up. My pulse is ridiculous. I'm not making this up. And he said to me, you know what? Let's do an experiment. I'm going to give you a shot of benzodiazepine, which it's a sedative, right?
Yeah.
Let me give you a shot of this, and it should calm your system down pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if you're having a heart attack, it's not going to stop the heart attack. But if you're having anxiety, it will stop the anxiety. So he gave me the shot, and within 5 minutes, I'm like, this stuff is the bomb.
Wow.
Like, where do I get me some of this?
Wow.
And that was the first time I said to Maggie, maybe it's not heart disease. Because Ativan wouldn't stop a heart attack.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful right there. What about, how do phobias play into this? I think you all mentioned phobias.
Yeah.
How do they fit into anxiety?
I'm the phobia queen. I like to say I'm the queen of phobias. I was the queen of phobias. Well, I mean, what happens, I think, with a phobia is that we get panic attacks when we try to do the phobia, right? So we go into a panic attack, which makes us avoid doing whatever it is that we were phobic about. So it could be, we hear so much about driving, for example. Mm-hmm. So, if we're driving and you have a panic attack, you're thinking, well, I can't control the car anymore because I'm in the middle of a panic, I'm having all these physical symptoms and it feels like the car is going to go out of control. And so naturally our brain tells us, well, you got to avoid driving then. You don't want to put yourself in this position, which is in reality sort of the opposite of what we need to do to get better.
Yes.
Which makes it very tricky. So obviously it doesn't feel like that, but we actually we end up avoiding, and then that creates an even bigger sort of anxiety loop in terms of, I'm going to go panic. I'm going to go driving. I'm going to have a panic attack. I can't go driving. We panic about having our next panic attack, particularly when we're having a phobia, because we know what will bring it on. We know getting in that car will bring it on. And the more we avoid, the stronger, our sort of neural pathway in our brain becomes to
rewired then.
We rewire ourselves. And it is, it was something that I had to do a lot of work on, because mine also, sometimes phobias can start spreading, so mine might have started on the plane, and then it went to driving, and then it went to the train, and then it went to the elevator. And so it was pretty quickly became agoraphobia, which, a lot of people think is fear of leaving the house, and it's not. It's fear of having a panic attack outside the house and not being able to get to your safe space, or getting sick outside the house and not being able to get to your safe space, which is usually in the apartment or the house.
Yeah, agoraphobia is sort of that idea that you'd be out in the wide open and in danger.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily have to do with needing to stay home.
Wow. Tell me, Abbe, you were just talking about medication. So what is your stance on medication to treat anxiety? both of you or Abby, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
We
we
have
have the
this,
same.
we have
Yeah.
the same stance on everything that when it comes to mental health. We actually have the same stance on most things. But in terms of medication, we believe that for some folks, well, for everyone, anxiety is a medical condition. Okay.
Yeah.
So for some folks, part of their treatment plan is going to be medication.
Yeah.
For some folks, it's not appropriate. What we don't believe in is shaming or blaming or judging anyone
Mm-hmm.
for his or her treatment plan.
Mm-hmm.
So, we talk to our community about this all the time, that, what's good for you may not be good for your neighbor. What's good for me may not be good for Maggie.
Mm-hmm.
We believe in treating anxiety so that your world doesn't shrink. We believe in you being in control of your own decisions, who you'll see, what you'll do, where you'll go. If you need medication to do that, awesome. If you don't need medication to do that, equally awesome. Mags and I take medication. That's part of our treatment plan.
Yeah.
We both needed it because of some of our for me, my extreme OCD I couldn't leave my house because of it. I was so racked with obsessions and compulsions. I needed medication that I take every single day that allows me to then use all my other tools
Mm-hmm.
so that I can live anxiously happy. And I'm not ruled by my obsessions and compulsions. And, I very rarely even have trouble with my OCD now because of it. So I'm very grateful. And Maggie had to take medication to overcome her phobia,
Mm-hmm.
for all her phobias, because she was doing exposure therapy. And, you can't sit in an elevator when you are feeling like you're going to throw up for an hour a day, which is what she had to work up to doing, if you don't have a
Wow.
little bit of pharmaceutical help. For most people, I mean,
Yeah.
some people can manage to do it. We don't know how. But so for us,
Yeah.
medication is part of our treatment.
Okay.
But we don't judge either way. We are supportive of anything that helps you manage your anxiety so that it doesn't manage you.
Got it. Thank you.
And
What do you think?
we just say
Go
with
ahead.
medication, we have a whole list of questions to ask. So when you go in there, you have the right to, we have a lot of questions that for you to ask. You need to come out knowing like what you're taking and why.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people do in reality get medication from their just their regular doctor. Not everyone can go to a psychiatrist. And even if you go to a psychiatrist, you may not have a good one. They're hard to find.
Yeah.
But so you have the right to ask, like, why are you giving me this medication instead of that medication? You have to, there's a lot of questions so that you're an informed consumer.
Yes, I agree. I remember when my son was in high school and I brought him into the internist for his physical and we started talking. They had him do the ADHD questionnaire thing.
Yeah.
And they said, she said, oh yeah, he's got ADHD. We're going to put him on Focalin, I think it was called. And okay. So he went on it. And I said, I'm going to take some of this if you're taking it. I want to see what's going on here. And I mean, I was like, I've never gotten so much done in one day. I was like, wow. My husband's like, what's going on? I'm like, wow, I recorded 5 podcasts. I cleaned the house. I made he was like, what is going on? I go, I don't know. This is like, wow. So we had gone in then 2 weeks later to our follow-up. And I said, can you tell me something? I said this to the doctor that gave him the medication. I said, what exactly is going on in the brain? I want to know exactly. I want to know what neurotransmitters are being affected. What's happening in the brain with this? Because wow, did I have a productive day? But it was like, then I couldn't sleep. I mean, it was awful. Like, yeah, I got a lot done, but then at night I was wide awake that whole night. So I didn't really do that again, but she didn't know. I was so upset. I was like, you're giving my child medication. You don't know which like you don't.
Michelle, we hear that so often.
It's like
it's
our
healthcare
system. Yeah, our healthcare system is scary. I'm just saying.
Yes.
Let me say it another way. It can be scary. There's some phenomenal doctors. There's some phenomenal nurses out there. There's some phenomenal people that work in healthcare. But if I have not, in my family, if we weren't advocates for people that we have in our family that have been in the hospital, I don't know. And a couple of them did die, and it was horrifying what we saw and witnessed. I was like, this is
We
scary.
really believe that everyone needs to learn how to be their own medical advocate for every reason.
Absolutely.
And we actually run workshops teaching people how to do that.
Yeah, like you need to ask questions. You don't listen to what doctors or nurses or whomever are saying.
And we tell people, if they won't answer your questions, then you move on and find someone who will.
Abby and I always tell each other that if anything happened seriously to her or to myself, like our jobs with each other is to go and be our hospital advocates.
Absolutely. And it's a job.
It's a full-time job.
You've got to stay on top of what the heck is going on. I mean, yeah, this is a whole other topic. Yes, I could go on and on and on for like 2 hours with stories.
But for our anxiety sisters and brothers out there, if you're considering medication, then there's a list of questions for your prescriber in our book. And they're really worth asking because bring a checklist. And, you know, I've walked in and said to a psychiatrist, I've held up the checklist and said, we're going to go through this.
Good for you. Yeah. We have to be educated and empowered. So
remember that your doctors work for you.
They do. We're paying a lot of money. They need to know what they're doing, and we need to ask the right questions to make sure that they know what they're doing for us. All right. Thank you. Ladies, this was phenomenal. Thank you for all of your wisdom. And there's so much going on with your groups and your book. And tell us, where would people find you?
They can find us on our website, www.anxietysisters.com. They can find us on Facebook. We have a really active and engaged Facebook page, which Mags and I moderate 24/7. So it's a really safe, wonderful place to be. We have a Tuesday night book group that's free. On Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock, although we're not doing one this week. But Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, come join us on Facebook Live, and we talk about a chapter of the book, and we give out some new information. And last week, we talked about medication and gave out the questions for the prescriber. We have a podcast every month, The Spin Cycle, which you can find on Amazon, Spotify, Google, anywhere you get your podcasts. And if you send us an email at absandmags@anxietysisters.com, I promise we respond to every email we get.
Wow. Thank you.
It takes a few days, but we do.
You can PM us on Facebook, and we also have Instagram. We are on Twitter, but only marginally. So don't contact us.
We're not really on Twitter.
Yeah, don't do it on Twitter, even though we have an account.
I always say to people, Twitter's not our milieu.
Yeah.
I love that. I love it. Well, thanks so much for being here, and thanks for all your work. I'm glad to have you on our planet, helping so many people. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work you do.
Thank you.
All righty. Hope you guys enjoyed that show. Do not forget, they have this beautiful book, The Anxiety Sisters Survival Guide, How You Can Become More Hopeful, Connected, and Happy.
Yes.
They have really done extensive work with anxiety, so absolutely go follow them. And I hope you guys enjoyed the show. And do not forget, if you're someone that needs support, head over to the Adult Chair closed Facebook group. We'd love to have you in there, and we'll help you find not only your way through anxiety, but really to help you get in your adult chair. All right, I'm signing off, heading to our Adult Chair Coaching certification. I will be with you guys next week, and have a lovely week. Love to all. Have a great week. I'll see you next week right here in my adult chair.